Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome. Hello. Happy Tuesday. Hope everyone's having a great day. I see a few folks watching live. If you can let me know that you can hear me in the comments, I would greatly appreciate that. We are working with a whole new tech setup today, so it is very possible that something is not going to work. So if you can hear me, just let me know in the comments. And I'm going to go ahead and dive in just a minute here. I just want to make sure everything looks good, that we're rocking and rolling. We are, like I said, we're working with a completely new tech setup. So let me know. Let me know if anything doesn't work out. And actually, we couldn't even get the mic to work. So I'm on my headphones, which is why I want to make sure that y'all can actually hear me. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm very excited for today's training today. This is a topic that is very, very important to me. It's a topic that has, I think, come up in a lot of business conversations recently, and it's this idea of hiring equitably. And we've heard a lot of talk this year in the online business world about how to run a more equitable business, how to really think about the fact that so many people in this country and in this world face very different circumstances than we do, and how can we work to solve that inequity. But when you're a small business owner, sometimes it feels like that's for the big guys because I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I'm just trying to figure out how to even get my business off the ground. So I'm not even really sure how this fits into my world. Maybe you don't have, maybe you don't hire right now, you don't have employees, you're a one woman or one man show. Maybe you're so new that you're thinking, I just really don't think that this is applicable to me right now. Stick with me because today we're going to actually talk about why it is applicable and what you can do about it, even if you don't hire employees, even if you don't have a lot of money. So I promise you, I think this is going to be good. And welcome everyone who is here. Please say hello if you are watching live in the comments. Where's my fancy little, I'm a little off my game today because I was saying at the beginning, we have a whole new tech setup today. So I'm still trying to learn everything and get the lay of the land. And we already had some tech glitches, not surprising. So hopefully this goes smoothly. If it doesn't, we will work our way through it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in here and just bear with me. Let me get everything, make sure it looks good. And again, if you're watching live, say hello. Okay, perfect. We are gonna change this. We gotta do some fancy schmancy things. Awesome. And let me go ahead and pull this little guy off so that y'all can actually see this a little bit better. So if you're just popping in, today's Tip Tuesday is all about how to hire equitably when you're a small business. So let's go ahead and actually dive in. I got to hit this computer over here for this one. Ooh, I forgot I was going to do blue slides today. So we're going to change it up and we're going to go with the teal background. So first, let's talk about why hiring equitably even matters. Look, and I said this at the beginning of this video, but our society is inequitable for many people. And, that may be women, it may be people of color, variety of circumstances. And what's really important for us as business owners is to acknowledge this. And you may be sitting here thinking, well, why does this even matter? This feels like a politics conversation, not a business conversation. And the reason it matters is because I believe as a business owner that we play an important role in society, that we're not here to just build our businesses and make money and, support our families, that we're actually here to create something that counts, something that has an impact. And when I think about sort of people who are leaders in this world, I think about people who have power, people who run things. A lot of the people are business owners, right? And so when I'm thinking about how to create my business and I'm thinking about the legacy and the impact that I want my business to have, I don't just want it to start and stop with the profits or with how I help my clients, set up, manage, and master the financial aspects of their business. I want it to go one step further, and I want to be a leader in the business community. I want to be someone who other people look to as a guide for how to run a business that goes beyond just the profit line, right? And so for me, creating a business that is equitable is a really critical piece of that because I recognize my power and my role and my ability to impact this massive inequality that so many people face. So that's the first piece of why this matters. This is a really big deal. And I'm guessing if you're watching this, you already care about this, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be watching this. The second reason why hiring equitably matters is because it sets you apart. It makes me sad to say, but I think a lot of business owners aren't thinking about this. And for most business owners, the reason isn't because they're bad people or they don't care about other people or anything like that. I think the reason just is because it's hard to start a business. It's hard to grow a business. There's a lot to do, and you don't have a lot of money at the beginning, and times can be tough, especially this year, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I think it's one of these things where a lot of people just sort of push it down the line and say, I'll deal with that when I get bigger. I'll deal with that when I have more money. I'll deal with that when we're not as busy. So paying attention to this stuff really can set you apart as a business owner, both to people you're trying to attract to come work for you, but also to clients and to partners and collaborators and to other people in your industry as well. Another reason why this matters is because I believe, and I think study after study has shown this, that more diversity brings greater perspectives and ideas. I like to think that I know it all, but I definitely don't. And I know that when I surround myself by people who have had different experiences and different perspectives and different ideas, that they make my business better. They bring something to the table that I don't have, and that is the output of their learned experiences. And so the more we can make the people who we listen to different than us, I think the better. Because if I just surrounded myself with people who had very similar lives and experiences to me, then I wouldn't really be getting any new perspectives. This also matters because the way we've hired in the past, the collective we, doesn't necessarily yield the better results. And I think, for very, very long time, and still, there is this emphasis on your education and where you worked and, all of these sort of things that frankly are deeply rooted in our patriarchal society. They're deeply rooted in our overly capitalist society. They're deeply rooted in the inequities that exist in our society. And we'll talk about this when we get to some of the specifics. And those things don't necessarily guarantee the better outcome. They don't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have someone who's the right fit for your team, someone who's going to, be the best worker, somebody who's going to bring the best ideas and the best perspectives to the table. I just don't think that those guarantee that, or even take a step back, not even guaranteed, but I don't think that those necessarily are the indicators that you're going to get the best results. I'm going to talk a little bit about my hiring practices as we go through, and I can tell you that one of the things, I don't ask about education at all. I don't ask the people. I suppose it would depend on the role, but it's never come up where I've asked if they have a college degree or not. That's just not something that matters to me, because at the end of the day, it's not an indicator of whether or not they have the right skills or experiences to work for me. And I'll talk about some of the questions I do ask that I think are better indicators. And lastly, I think this also matters, hiring, and this isn't just hiring equitably, it's hiring and running your business equitably. It matters because it helps you build a long-term team. So when the people that are coming into your world are treated in a more equitable fashion, they're more likely to stay with you. They're more likely to work harder for you. They're more likely to become an ingrained part of your business. And I think that's a really critical piece of it. Lastly, you might be wondering, well, why the heck are we talking about this when what I really talk about is the money stuff in the business? And there's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, because ultimately, one of the biggest assets of your team, second to you, are the people that you hire to work with you. And so I think it's actually really critical to your bottom line that we focus on this stuff. But the second reason goes back to what I talked about at the beginning of this video, which is that I really care about, especially women, especially people of color, creating wealth and creating businesses that bring us more power and more impact in this society. And I think that by doing this, by more and more of us hiring equitably and building equitable businesses, we're going, the momentum behind that movement is going to build. And the momentum of everything we're doing is going to build. And that ultimately is going to benefit our businesses as well. So it's creating a new culture, basically. So that's why all this matters. I know that was a little bit long, but I wanted to really kind of explain that before I dive in. Now, I've got 9 ways that you can do this in your business. Don't feel like you have to do all of them. Write them down, come back to this video, bookmark it, whatever, is your system. But just keep this as kind of a guide for things you can start to do in your business. And my recommendation to you would be to just choose one for today. Just choose one thing that you're going to try to implement in your business over the next, let's say, 30 days, maybe before the end of 2020, if you're watching this here live with me. So that would be my recommendation to you. And then once you get that one kind of part of your system, come back and implement another one. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive in. And for folks watching live, if you've got questions, go ahead and post them in the comments. I'll try to get to them at the end. So, okay, so the first tip to hire equitably is to be transparent about what you pay. Now, there are lots of studies and lots of people much smarter than me that go into exactly why this matters. But here's my basic thought on this. It's actually a two-parter. So the first part is what tends to happen, at least I've seen in my experience, is when you go for a job and you have no idea what the job pays, you're going to do either a couple of things. Number one, you might actually scare off people who perhaps think that it either isn't going to pay what they need, or it's maybe going to pay too much and therefore leads them to believe that they're not qualified enough for it. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to set someone up for when they go in to go for that job, and let's just say you decide to hire them, they don't know what this job is going to go for. So they may actually go in and put themselves in a worse negotiating position by thinking you're going to pay X when really you're going to pay so much more than X. So being transparent about the pay not only gives respect to the person who is taking their time to apply for the position, but also gives them the information they need to make an appropriate decision about whether or not this is a position that works for them. So it's giving a little bit of control to them, not control over you, but control and information that's really going to benefit them. I also want to put this out there that I do this even if I'm looking for a contractor. So this isn't just an employee salary situation. If I'm looking for a contractor, I'm always really clear about what my budget is, or what I'm willing to pay, because I think that that's just one of the best ways. Again, information is a great way to empower someone. And by withholding this information, we're keeping all the power. And so part of my goal in building an equitable business is really to help spread that power around and not give it away, but share that power with the person that I'm hoping to build a long-term relationship with. Okay, so that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, don't ask for salary history. Or pay history. It doesn't have to be salary, but pay history. This is kind of the same as tip number 1, same idea, in the sense that, if someone comes in and you like them and you say, okay, great, we're going to hire you, tell me about your salary history. And they give it to you. And then you base what you're going to pay them off of that. Well, we know that women are paid less than men. We know that people of color are paid less than white people. So asking for their salary history is setting them up to be paid less than their counterparts would if they were a different gender or a different race. So right off the bat, you're setting them up for failure. Okay, and we've got a great question. Yeah, so this is, what if you aren't sure of how much to pay? Do you have info on researching it? Yeah, and it kind of depends what the space is and what the job is. So I do a couple of things. If this is an employee and I'm going to pay them salary, or even an hourly wage, I'm going to go into a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to go to some of the job boards. So like Indeed.com or Monster.com, ones where whatever my industry is or the job is, I know there are going to be job postings, and I'm going to look there to see they have job postings, but they also have salary information. Now, it's not always completely accurate, but it's a good place to start. The other thing I like to do is actually ask around, ask people in my industry. So when I was hiring for a VA, I asked around. I asked my business coach. I asked my peers in the space. I said, what are you seeing people be paid? And I didn't just ask 1 or 2 people. I asked like 15, because I wanted to get a really good range of answers to try to weed out some of that bias, right? And so I felt like if I could ask enough people, then I could maybe have enough information to make an informed decision on that. So that's where I would start, are places like that. Again, it depends on the industry, but I really think just asking around. Now, the thing I want to caution about with the asking around is back to the point I just said, which is that we know that typically women and people of color are paid less. This is why you want to be really careful when you're asking this question and you're asking your peers to take the information you get with a bit of a grain of salt. So, making sure you're asking enough people, making sure you're asking enough people who have a range of people working for them, and just really trying to collect as much information as possible. I think that's a piece of it. The other thing I would do too, and this gets into more if you're paying someone kind of at the lower range, is understand what a livable wage is in your area. So here, I'm in Massachusetts. Here in Massachusetts, MIT has put out a really great tool that basically tells people what the minimum livable wage is for someone who's single or married and has 0 kids, 1 kid, 2 kids, etc. in Massachusetts. And it gives sort of a baseline. And I can tell you that baseline for a single person with no kids is about $5 more than our current minimum wage is. So that's a great example of where I'm not going to just rely on what the minimum wage is. Even if it's an entry-level job, I'm going to look at that livable wage, because part of paying and hiring equitably is making sure that you're paying someone enough so that they can afford the basic necessities of life. So that is how I would go about that. Great question. Okay, so tip number 3, don't ask for criminal histories until after you've made a conditional offer. And this is one that's particularly important. And I promise I won't go on a soapbox about the criminal justice system, but let me just tell you, there are massive inequities in the criminal justice system. There's a big conversation right now, and I'm very glad we're having it, around the fact that particularly Black people are disproportionately harmed by the criminal justice system. And to take that one step further, there's just mounds of conversation and studies that have been done on the fact that this starts in our schools. So, this starts with the way kids are educated. It starts with the presence of law enforcement in schools, and it starts with essentially what is called the school to prison pipeline. Again, that is particularly harmful and targeted at, in many cases, Black people. So asking about criminal histories when you're in that interview process can be a really dangerous thing, because what it can do is basically eliminate someone off the bat who, frankly, has been a target of these racist and discriminatory practices. It can kind of eliminate them off the bat from your process, when in fact it doesn't really say anything about the work they will do for you or the skill sets that they bring to the table. Now, I can understand the concern. You're thinking, okay, well, maybe, I work with money, right? I work, we do financial stuff. Do I want someone who has a criminal record? You can certainly make that a part. Once you've given the conditional offer, you can certainly make that a part of your process to onboard them. And, for example, I probably wouldn't hire someone who has committed financial crimes, because they're going to have access to sensitive financial information. But what I would recommend is that's a part of your onboarding process or your sort of post-offer process, and then make a determination at that point. But by asking about it before you make the offer, just even that unconscious bias that we all have is likely going to lead to you eliminating them, even if they're actually the best candidate. So that would be my recommendation there for tip number 3. Okay, tip number 4, make your job qualifications skills-based, not credential-based. I see this all the time, and I cringe when I see it. Someone will say, must have an MBA, or must have a college degree, or must have this, or must have that. I said it at the beginning. I personally don't believe that in most jobs, those things are absolutely required. I'm not saying they're bad. They definitely bring something to the table. But in most jobs, I don't think they're required. Now, you obviously have things like a doctor. Certainly you want them to have gone to medical school. That's a very specific thing. But for the most part, a lot of the jobs or the type of people we're going to be working with in our businesses, this isn't going to be an issue. So when I do my job descriptions, I like to make them skills-based. I focus on what are the things that I want a person doing this role to have? What do I want? Do I want them to be detail-oriented? Do I want them to be, an ideas person? Do I want them to be an executor? They can make things happen. And I really focus on that. And let me tell you, that, in my opinion, is a far more effective way to hire, because it gets you somebody who has the exact skill set you need to do the job, not somebody who has the fancy degree on their wall. And it's more equitable because, again, think about access to education. Think about the cost of education. Think about the fact that many people, again, more likely women, more likely people of color, are less likely to have the type of upper level credentials that white people have. And so if you want to hire equitably, focusing on those skill-based qualifications and writing your job descriptions that way can be really important over making them credentials-based. Okay, so tip number 5, talking about the job description here, continuing this on, eliminate discriminatory or exclusionary language from your job descriptions. And I'm not going to give a ton of examples. You can Google this. There are great lists out there online. But thinking about how you're writing the job description and who is it attracting and who is it turning off. So I'll give you a great example. When we talk about gender, plenty of studies have shown that women tend to shy away from job descriptions that have words that would imply, so words talking about competition, or words talking about kind of implying more of an aggressive environment. Women tend to shy away from those. And if you Google, you'll kind of get a list. There are some great articles on this. But as you read through this stuff, these aren't things that you would necessarily think of. So that's why I really point this one out, because this isn't something where you can just sort of sit down and say, okay, I'm not going to write this job description in an exclusionary way. This is, at least for me, it was an area where I really had to educate myself and look at some examples and really think about some of the things that people had pointed out for what might turn folks away. Okay, so that's tip number 5. Okay, tip number 6, implement blind review practices. Now, even if you're a single person, you can absolutely do this. So one of the things I do, I don't always do it this way, but oftentimes people apply for jobs with me through Google Forms. One of the things I've actually done, and on Google Forms, if you've used it before, you know that it'll create a spreadsheet for you and it'll put the information in there, right? So one of the things I've actually done is I've formatted that spreadsheet in a way, and you can do this a couple of ways. You can either hide the columns with the name and any other sort of information that would give you some insight into the person's education or race or any, gender, anything like that. You can also, I know some people have changed the color on those columns so that, it's like black on black or white on white, whatever, so that you can't see the text. So it's not gone, because you eventually need that. You need to know their name. You need to know some other things, but it at least puts you in a position where you can review the applications in a blind manner, meaning you're not seeing their name, you're not seeing the location of where they live. That's another one that can trigger, if somebody applies and they live in, I don't know, what's a very expensive place? I don't know, Boston or San Francisco, versus somebody who applies and maybe lives, here in the Boston area, we think about the neighborhoods, Boston or Cambridge is a very expensive place to live, versus, some of the other towns here that, maybe have a tougher history. So eliminating that information or hiding it so that you can't see it, so that you don't automatically make assumptions. Oh, that person lives in Cambridge, I'm going to assume some things about them. So name, location, gender, anything gendered. If you do ask about education, this is where I would blind that out. Again, I don't think you need to ask about it, but if you do, I'd blind that out. Work history as well. So one of the questions I actually ask about work history is I don't ask, in fact, I've rarely asked, list your work history. I don't ask for a resume. I don't want to see I don't want to see the details of where they've worked in that sense, because even that can be discriminatory, right? If we're talking in finance world, if they've worked at, a big 4 accounting firm and they worked at Goldman Sachs and they worked at this, and this, that tells me something about them. Versus if they worked at, a local firm because maybe they couldn't afford to go to a top tier school, which means they couldn't get the interview at the big accounting firm. So they worked at a local firm. that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to mark out. So what I ask instead is, how many years of experience do you have? And once I get into the interview, then I can start to have those conversations. But again, it's not about the name. It's not about where did you work. It's about, tell me about what that experience was like, because I want to know what their skills are like. So putting as many sort of blinders on in this process as possible helps remove that implicit or unconscious bias. Okay, so tip number 7, use the same set of questions for every applicant. This one always frustrated me when I was in corporate, because you'd go in for an interview, and if the person interviewing you, if you and that person got along and you were kind of very similar, great, you'd hit it off, you'd have this great conversation. But if you and the person weren't very similar, maybe you had very different interests, then the conversation, maybe they didn't talk to you very much. And then meanwhile, you're sitting there waiting for your next interview, and you see the next guy go in, and now he and that guy are, shooting the shit, and they're happy as clams together because maybe they both like fly fishing or whatever. And so now they're talking about that. And it sort of makes you feel like, well, shoot, if we had had more common interests, if we had been more similar, then maybe I would have gotten the job because we would have had a better conversation. So again, to remove that sort of unconscious bias, I like to have the same set of questions for every applicant. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't ask follow-up questions or that I can't dive in a little further on one particular person or another. I absolutely can. But I like to have my uniform set of questions so that I'm treating each applicant exactly the same, and I'm not letting those personal preferences seep in and really shape the conversation that we're having. Okay, so tip number 8. Pay fairly and well. Now, this is the one where a lot of small business owners say, I can't do this. Like, I just don't have that much money. This isn't an option. This is the least I can pay. This is where I'm going to come in with some tough love. How you pay your people and what you pay your people, I think, is one of the critical components in ensuring that you get the most out of this relationship. Because if you are undercutting the person that is doing work for you, if you are underpaying them, what's going to happen over time, not only are they going to struggle themselves financially, but they're also going to not be as committed and bought into what you're doing if they're constantly feeling like the work they're doing isn't valued. And you'd be showing that by not paying them appropriately. So to me, this is one of the most important things you can do. You don't always get it right. To the question earlier about how much do you pay, sometimes it's about kind of figuring it out. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get to a point where everybody feels good. But I think this is one of the most important things you need to think about when you're thinking about, hiring and running your business equitably. And I get that concern of, I don't have that much money. But I promise you, paying somebody a low rate and having them do work isn't going to save you money. You are going to be far better off by paying them a livable wage, paying them the appropriate rate, because they are going to work harder for you. They're going to work faster. They're going to work more efficiently. They're going to bring more to the table. They're going to contribute ideas. They're going to contribute feedback, opinions, perspectives. That all is worth its weight in gold. If you just pay them the base amount and that's it, then yeah, they'll do the work, but it'll probably take them longer. They probably won't stay with you as long, which means you've got to rehire again, and that costs you time and money. So in my opinion, tip number 8 is one of the most important things you can do. And this is something, again, you've got to constantly evaluate and constantly make sure that you're doing this appropriately. So tip number 8, pay fairly and well. And by the way, this isn't just for employees. I mean this for contractors too. The last thing I want to say about this too is, and this frustrates me to the high heavens, because what I see happen too often is business owners complain about, somebody who wants a discount, or somebody who, won't pay them what they want, or, didn't hire them because they said their pricing was too high, whatever it is. That same person then turns around and lowballs somebody when they need a new website, when they need social media done, whatever it is. If we want to create this culture where we're paying people appropriately and we're valuing their work, especially women, then we need to do that ourselves. We need to act that way. We need to be a part of creating that culture. So tip number 8, pay fairly, pay well. This, I think, is one of the most important takeaways I can give you today. Okay, and then last tip, we've made it to the end. We're just a few minutes over on our video, but last tip, tip number 9, when choosing contractors or vendors, so this is for all my small business owners who don't necessarily have employees. It's for everybody, but it's particularly for you if you only hire contractors or vendors. Make sure you're considering a diverse group. A few weeks ago, I was thinking about getting a new website template. And I Googled like show it website templates. And the first 5 that came up were all beautiful and they were all great. And you know what they all were? They were all white women. So what I then did is I then spent about 2 hours searching and asking on Facebook and asking other people I knew and actually reaching out to show it and saying, who do you know that isn't a white woman? And it's not because I'm knocking white women. I am one. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that in the end, I may not choose one of their template packages. But I wanted to make sure that of all the options I considered, that I was considering a diverse group. And it's not just for the feel-goodness of it. It's not just so that I can say, oh, I considered some Black women. Okay, great. It's because, again, every single person has a different learned experience, has a different skill set. And if I'm just looking at people who are like me, then I'm not going to get a diverse range of options. So I want to make sure that I'm looking at that diverse group because it also, yes, it's fair, it's equitable, it's the right thing to do, but it also benefits me. It benefits my business because my business will get better because of the contributions and the input of people who are not like me. So this to me is a very important one. And if you are just starting out, if you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have employees, if you don't even have a VA, but I know you're going to get a website. I know you're going to buy some social media templates. I know you're going to, whatever you're going to sign up for. It could be a course. It could be training, education. Are all the people you're learning from, white men? It could be an event you're going to, signing up for. Are all the speakers white men? So this isn't just about employees. This is about really anyone you're paying in your sphere to support your business and making sure that when you are choosing someone, that you are looking at a diverse group. Even if at the end of it, you still choose, that site by a white woman, by a woman who happens to be a white woman, because that's the one you like the best, fine. But make sure you're looking at a diverse selection before you do that. Cool? All right, friends, that is the end for us. So I'm going to pop these slides off here. Let me make sure. Hold on. I got a lot of tech I got to worry about here. It's a lot. I'm going to pop that off. Hold on. We got a lot of things we got to do before let's bring this back up. Not that y'all forgot who I was, but let's bring this back up. And before we go, I want to remind everyone that you can grab my Biz Money bundle, which includes my cash flow tracker, my budget template, my profit calculator, my quarterly tax calculator, that's the big one right there, and my money meetings toolkit. You can grab all of those by going to megkwheeler.com/bundle. This, I'm telling you, these are the exact tools I use in my business to track the money, to track the cash, to figure out my budget, to make all of my financial decisions in my business. And I package them together all for you so that you can do the same in your business. They come with explanatory videos. So it's not just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. You're going to get the tools, you're going to get the videos. And I think you're really going to find them useful. So head on over to megkwheeler.com/bundle, grab those today. And I will see you all back here next week for another Tip Tuesday. Bye for now.